Good morning.
Morning.
Good
Morning,
morning.
Michael.
Good morning, all. Now,
Morning.
at Bank of Ireland, inclusion and diversity is at the heart of who they are. They embrace diversity where everyone is welcome and remain committed to enabling change. Now, to tell us more about what the bank is doing and why this piece of work is so important to them, please welcome to our virtual table our headline panelists, Matt Elliott, Michael McLaughlin, Nancy
Morning.
Matinsu, good morning, and Gold Sovereign Award winner, Terry Prone. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the summit. We've been absolutely looking forward to today and how you're going to be sharing with us how, the change that you want to see. If I may just ask everyone, let's go around the table very quickly to introduce yourselves and share with our delegates who you are, how you self-identify so that people know your positionality and how you identify, which informs your conversation. So I'm very happy to kind of kickstart this. I'm Meenakshi Mistry, founder and CEO of Equality Leaders, and my pronouns are she and her. Matt, you're next to me on my camera, so could I pass over to you next?
Of course, yeah. Hi, everyone, and thanks for having us along today. Matt Elliott, he, him, and I'm the Chief People Officer at the Bank of Ireland.
Thank you. Nancy, perhaps next?
Hi, I'm Nancy. I'm she, her, and I'm a manager in the Credit Policy and Impairment Oversight team in Bank of Ireland.
Perfect, thank you. Terry?
I'm Terry Prone. I'm she, her, and I'm an external consultant. I run a thing called the Communications Clinic, and we do some work for Bank of Ireland.
Perfect, thank you. And Michael?
Good morning, Meenakshi, and good morning all.
Good morning.
Michael McLaughlin, he, him. I'm head of mortgages and bank of work for distribution channels part of the business. And I've been in the bank for just over 6 years now.
Fantastic, welcome everyone. Matt, may I come over to you first, please, as Chief People Officer? You lead an amazing organisation and you've led the organisation to making some really great progress towards gender balance. Why is this piece of work so important to you and why is it so important to the bank?
Great, thank you. So again, thank you for having us along. It's brilliant to be here. Happy International Women's Day, everybody. It's important to the organisation. It is important to me on a personal level as well. So maybe if I get the chance here to talk a little bit about both. I joined the bank 3 years ago and there was a lot of great work already underway. Before that, I worked at Virgin Money where we put a significant effort into equality of all forms. And so I was really delighted to see that progress in the organisation and be able to build on the impetus. And what I absolutely believe for the organisation is we take our responsibility seriously. We are a major employer in the island, in Ireland, but also in the UK as well. And I think with that responsibility comes certain elements that you need to take seriously and take a leading role around. And equality is one of them, and gender equality is certainly a critical part of that. And we recognised that we weren't where we needed to be. Just statistically looking at representation at all levels in the organisation told us that we weren't where we needed to be. So I think there's a serious responsibility for us within the organisation, but also when we think about our role in wider society to acknowledge the change that's required and go about resolving it. And certainly for me, sort of personal reflections are, even when, and you touched on it in some of your introduction there, you look at the progress that's been made, and I think it's undeniable and undoubted there is progress. We look at the FTSE 100 female representation on boards that was updated recently at over 39% now. But the reflection for me there is 10 years ago, it was 12.5% when, if you like, the focus and the government effort started, and if you like, the real commitment started to formalise around this. And in many ways, you've got to reflect on it as being good progress, but disgraceful that it was required. And in many ways, all that was required was a focus around, obviously, many men actually leading those FTSE 100 organisations to think differently and question how they were building their leadership team. And I don't think I've heard many FTSE 100 chairs complaining about the quality of their teams as a result of becoming more balanced. So I think it just tells us how far we had to go here, and we take our responsibility seriously there, and we have, I'm pleased to say, a balanced board at the Bank of Ireland. And then you get deeper into what we're trying to do at the bank, and I think everything we do around equality sits within a wider approach for us. Our stated purpose, if you like, is to enable colleagues, customers and communities to thrive. And indeed, you talked about thriving on the way in your intro there, and it's essential for us. And I think it's a really great call to action and focus for the organisation. We had to recognise that possibly when we looked at our stats, not everybody was thriving. And so irrespective, it's a focus for us as a result. And it's one that I've seen intensify relevance-wise over the last couple of years, as we've all experienced a global pandemic. And then, I'd add to your comment about Ukraine, just the disgraceful events happening in Eastern Europe. And what that brings home to me is over the last couple of years, just how changeable the world is, right? And just how important actually to people their organisation really is in that very challenging and changing world. And I've certainly seen the need for colleagues to have more of a connection, often in the last couple of years, more of a social connection that actually they want from their organisation. And we didn't necessarily used to think about it in that way. It's also got me thinking far more about us as a truly caring employer. And I think we're very businesslike in a commercial organisation. It's right that we are. And the HR contribution over the years has become more focused, more strategic, more commercial. I wonder whether we actually lost sight a little bit of what we all need, which is a connection to our place of work and knowing we're working for a caring employer. And when I think about all of that, and I think about my own family, I have 2 little boys, so I'm not here talking today about gender equality because women need to get to top. So I've got 2 daughters, that story's not coming from me, right? But what I would say is what I want for them when they grow up, they're 10 and 12 now, I want to know they're in a safe place at work. I want to know they're in a fair place at work. I want to know they're going to have an equal opportunity. And I feel I've got an amazing opportunity leading this organisation to make sure I do my very best, and Bank of Ireland does its very best to bring about a fairer society and a fairer workplace. And I think it's a special opportunity.
Thank you, Matt. And you've spoken about your professional ambitions and your personal ambitions here. You personally are guided by a framework which centers around transparency, action, and leadership. What does that actually look like in practice, and how do you role model these as a leader?
Well, you're right. So my own sort of personal call to action is to recognise what needs to change, to be transparent about that, and then act on it. It's just a simple model. I'm very straightforward, and as my colleagues know, very simple in my application of what I do. So when we think about gender in particular, from my role perspective, I think I have a choice of what do we do when I observe the facts. The facts are we have around 53% female representation in the whole organisation, yet in our senior positions that reduces to 39%. So do I say, well, there's lots of reasons for that and pass by, or do we actually say we need to look at the barriers why that's the case? We have to say over a period of time, there have been factors at play, there are barriers in the way that mean we've not got to an equally representative position. And I would prefer to take action as opposed to observe our reality. And that does mean, therefore, asking questions as to how the organisation's been doing, what our mindset's been, and how we make sure that we change. And I think that needs to be discussed. I don't believe in going about action, not being clear about it. And it does bring, when it comes to gender equality, good questions from men about, does this mean I'm disadvantaged? Does it mean actually it's going to be unfair? And I think once we actually have a conversation about that, everybody understands the actions that we're taking are entirely appropriate when you look at the reality of representation in the company, and you have to accept there hasn't been over a period of time fair opportunity for reasons within and obviously outside of the organisation in wider society. And so that's how I like to think I go about things. That's how I think we go about things in the bank. really clear about what we're looking to do and why, and we have a really adult conversation about it.
That's amazing, and it sounds like as though it's it's framed around progress over perfection, and it's okay to be that imperfect leader. We don't have to come into work and be perfect, and it's okay to say hands up and say, hey, I need some help, and how can you guide me? And that kind of brings me very nicely onto a question to Nancy and Matt. I'd love to come back to you about the piece that you spoke about, the progress and the 50-50. And I think we do need to celebrate that. You know, we are celebrating International Women's Day. Let me come back to you on how you almost achieved that 50-50 gender balance. But coming over to you, Nancy, you were absolutely instrumental in designing a Women of Colour series. So congratulations on that. You know, it's a space for women of colour to share stories, insights about their experiences, as well as hosting interviews and other talks. How did this project come about, and why is it so important for you?
Firstly, thank you for having me on the panel. And actually, yes, this series started basically around the kitchen table, and we were talking about how gender balance is at the forefront of most companies, and it is at the forefront of the bank as well. And for me personally, I was focused more so on the intersectional piece around being a woman of color and being female and Black. And that then led me to look to see how many women of color do we have in senior management positions. And at the moment, we don't have a lot, and that's due to many factors, and that could be down to the immigration level. As you know, Ireland is still young in terms of immigration, and that could translate into the workplace as well. So with that, I thought to create a platform where we could bring senior women of color to talk about how they've made it to those positions, and hopefully create a strong visual and send a message to junior staff members who can also then emulate that or take away some lessons to see what they can do in order to progress within their career. And it's been great. Like Matt said, it is a very supportive bank that I work for, and they've created this platform. They have a number of networks that have supported me in putting this together. I'm part of the Gender Balance and the multicultural networks in the bank, and those two have been very vocal and helped me put together the Women of Colour series, and it's been received really well within the bank so far.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Nancy, and thank you for sharing that. And what advice would you give to anyone who's considering doing something very similar to what you have done to help build this kind of work as part of their de&i strategy? How did you, you talk about that conversation started at the kitchen table, and I absolutely believe some of these conversations really do need to start at our kitchen table. It's not just in the workplace. How do we start these conversations at the kitchen table?
Well, for me, I suppose, because this was an issue that affected me directly, I wanted to do something about it. As you said, you want to be the change you want to see. And with that, then I approached the bank, the two networks that I'm part of, and I broached this idea to have to create a platform for women to speak, and they were very supportive in doing that. And within that, I've created allies who've supported me through the journey. So if anyone had any de&i initiative that they wanted to put forward in the bank, I would suggest that they do. There's really great supports within the bank. There's a number of networks that they can leverage off and take it from there.
Mm-hmm. That's a really great example of allyship. I love that. Thank you so much. Michael, I'm going to come to you next. You're a champion for the Gender Balance Network. How are you using your platform of privilege to be an ally for women? And can you give us an example of what allyship actually looks like for you?
Yeah. Good morning, Alexia, and thank
morning.
you for having me here today. I suppose my involvement, a little bit like Monty, became involved actually at the kitchen table. I do have daughters, and it was something that happened just in my personal life that actually, I suppose, triggered a particular interest for me. And a little bit like what Matt is saying, we can stand by and we watch, or we can actually take action. And I decided to become involved and try and take action. And I suppose part of my passion is to ensure that my daughters have the exact same opportunities that my sons have, and bringing that then through to try and bring that through into, I suppose, an area that I can influence that in to start with. Initially was in Bank of Ireland, which is, I suppose, what triggered my involvement. In terms of the allyship and the position that I find myself in and being able to leverage off that, I think one of the things that I and my colleagues, and I'm co-chair of the Gender Balance Network, but I think one of the things that we enjoy is the what I call the enlightened and positive leadership that's actually coming from Matt and from others within the and that kind of creates the canvas for us to go out and draw on and trial and do things and experiment on to see what works and what doesn't work. And we've taken an approach of where we look to do things which are, from our network perspective, where we're looking to do things which are both formal and informal. Around the formal aspects, it's around some of the programs that we would be involved in and help to encourage. So through our people services team, there are different programs like Accelerate and Rise. There's a group executive committee, which is a mentoring program. And we within the network would encourage the involvement of our colleagues in that, to get them to participate in that. And then on the more informal side, it's about sometimes making sure that the structures are right. So Monty mentioned there the strong visual. One of the things that we've done, and Terry who's on this is part of this, would be a recipient of our Gold Sovereign Award, is actually trying to create those strong visuals, but doing that in kind of more informal ways, where we do a series of My Story events, where we have people both internally and externally who come in and talk about their journey, what they have been through, the challenges they had, how they overcome. And it's very much based on sharing and participation. And I suppose I and the others who are part of the network, our role is to encourage engagement and to encourage, I suppose, the audience and the participation and then to influence that. But then we have broader things like today that we're involved in, International Women's Day, equally to International Men's Day, which is a little bit of a challenge, to be honest with you. But if we're going to get this right, this is about getting participation. It's gender balance. It's about getting participation from male and females into the program and encouraging that. And then we do other things like the Women in Finance program and how we encourage our participations in that. So key to me in this process is actually my role in influencing that, and actually in particular my role in influencing other men who look like me, who are kind of similar to me in the organization, to encourage them, because unless we get their participation and their involvement, we're not going to have successful allyship programs. We're not going to have successful gender balance programs. If we see it as being, for other groups or other parts, or that's not relevant to me, it's not going to work. It has to be relevant to every member of the organization, such that we get it to a point that it becomes irrelevant to every member of the organization, because it's just embedded in everything that we do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Michael. And I think we need many more Michaels and Matts in this world. Michael, when we last spoke, you gave me a really great example of allyship in action, what allyship in action actually looked like. And it was something so very small, but made a very big difference. You shared with me an example of your daughters received new kits for their football team or rugby team. Can you just share with our delegates that example? Because I just feel that it was so inspiring that I thought we could talk about that today, perhaps.
Yeah, and I suppose this was one of the triggers for me becoming involved. I suppose I saw my son and my daughters. I have twin daughters who are now 13. Went to the same local school, and in their fifth year, they were picked on the Gaelic football team. So unique sport in Ireland, a unique sport to the Irish, but they were picked on their senior Gaelic football team, and they came home with such excitement, such thrill, such elation, the two of them, which made it easier that they were both picked, I'll be honest with you too as well. So we didn't have comparisons, but it was brilliant and delighted for them. But they came home with the jerseys from the last year's boys team. And the senior boys team was announced on the same day. And the senior boys team got new jerseys. And the senior girls team got last year's senior boys team's jersey. And I suppose when I came home and I was talking to my wife later that evening, they'd gone to bed. They were still full of excitement. But to me, it showed the differential. They were in a mixed school, and it was showing the differential that was taking place. And if we're doing that at such a young age, and showing this differentiation at such a young age, this message to them, while it hadn't have necessarily maybe processed because of the excitement of being picked on the team, at some point it's a visual, and it particularly really stood out for me, that it was the wrong message. It was the wrong message to the boys, and it was the wrong message to the girls. It was telling both of them that they are different and that we treat them differently. And as I say, it was probably, listen, I'll credit my good wife. She kind of said to me that evening, yeah, well, you can sit here and talk about it, or you can do something about it. So we did, and my involvement in doing something about it is in work, but we did something about it locally as well. Me, I'd have to say, and a few other fathers and mothers who came together and changed that. They've moved on from that school, but I hope that the school actually realizes that they have a series of parents out there, a series of influencers, a series of people who want to see their children have equal opportunity and to create the environment for them. But I think, to me, it was more about the message that we were sending. It wasn't just the environment we were putting people in. It was the message we were sending to people at such a young age that could and does influence them. And that's the kind of things that potentially stays with them. And, we're sitting on a panel here today. We are privileged to be in the panel here today and have the opportunity to try and change and influence that. And I suppose that's maybe what encouraged me and encouraged my involvement from that point. I could continue to observe, or I could try and change.
No, thank you for sharing that. And, that's a really, really great example of allyship in action. And it goes back to Nancy's point of, these conversations really do need to also start at the kitchen table as well. Thank you. Terry, if I may come over to you. You are a Goal Sovereign alumni and an industry leader and a published author. You've delivered communication training in 17 countries, published more than 30 books, won so many awards. As women, we have been conditioned to be likable. We are constantly apologizing, told us to use the right language. In your opinion, is it the case that women continue not to believe in themselves? What's happening? Could you tell us a little bit more?
Well, first of all, the context has changed. I got started in my career with thundering failure, really, because I was a broadcast journalist and I got called in along with the other women in the department into the head of current affairs office, and he fired us all for being women. And when we said, what? He said that he couldn't send a woman down the Falls Road in Belfast, where there was a war going on at the time. And I was stupid enough to speak up, and I said, oh, men are more bulletproof, are they? And he said, get out. And that was it. We had no choices, no nothing. I got lucky in that around the same time, I got asked to join a training company. And one of the things that the training company did was prepare people for job interviews and promotion interviews. It could be a student going for a first job, or indeed an internship, or it could be a surgeon going for a consultancy post. And about halfway through each of the interviews, we would ask a particular question, because it was a very productive question. And it was simple. It was, how ambitious are you? And it divided the participants straight down the line on gender lines. The men would say, yeah, I'd be pretty ambitious. I would like to achieve X, Y, and Z. The women would say, I wouldn't be comfortable and they would effectively faff around. Now, at the time, that was 50 years ago, right? 50 years on, I checked with all of my 12 trainers about this issue. They still use the question, and the answer divide is nearly the same as it was half a century ago. Women are still reluctant because of what you said, because of the need to be relatable. And this is not something that you say, oh, well, it's just a matter of affirmative training. No, or assertiveness training. No, it isn't. It's because women are very clever and they understand the unwritten rules. And the unwritten rules say, you state that you're ambitious, you be blunt about it, you will not be liked. And that's one of the things that has carried over. Bank of Ireland is one organisation that has radically changed the context, and that's wonderful. Now we have to make women comfortable with that new context, eager to try it. And one of the things that I feel very strongly about is that in training, the German writer Goethe said that if you treat a human as they are right now, that's all they'll ever be. But if you treat them as what they could become, they can become it. And in training and development work with women, that's what we need to do. Not to encourage them, but to give them the sense of the possible, because it frees everybody to be the totality of themselves.
Thank you. Do you think women hide their ambition? And
Is
if they
that-
do, why?
I didn't hear your question. Go again, Manaxi.
Do women hide their ambition?
Very often they do hide their ambition because there are things that make women likable in the workplace, and ambition is not one of them. And furthermore, to this day, you will have, if somebody says in a company, oh, he's very ambitious, it's regarded as a plus for a man. Whereas if you say, oh, she's very ambitious, as would have been said about Billie Jean King, the feeling is, oh, she's rigid, she's hard, she's driven, she's not kind, she's not warm. And those surrounding contextual realities tend, as you say, to make women hide their ambition.
And what piece of advice would you give to women who want to be ambitious? How do we break these barriers, Terry?
If you're in a situation like in the bank where the context is now positive, I would say a key thing to you: hang around with the boosters rather than the sympathizers. Very often, because we have had so many problems on the way up, whether it's medical problems or rights problems or sexual harassment problems, we tend to hang around with people who are sympathetic. Sympathetic doesn't get you to the top, bluntly. Find people, and sometimes you find them around the kitchen table. You find them if you're lucky enough to marry them, male or female. Go for boosters. Go for people who think that you're cleverer even than they are and want to prove that to the world. Because if you have even one person who believes in you to that extent, God, it's so much easier to believe in yourself to that extent and to go for it with courage.
Oh, you have just inspired me this morning. Thank you, Terry. Just surround yourselves by great people, right? That's what you're saying. That's exactly what I believe in. And many people say that they've got loads of friends. I think I can count my best friends on one hand. You have friends and you have really great friends, right? You only need to be surrounded by a few people that will lift you. I think it's time to celebrate, actually. Gavin, I'm sorry, Matt, I'm going to come back to you. Bank of Ireland set very ambitious targets 3 years ago to achieve a 50-50 gender balance by the end of 2021. What interventions did you use to increase the representation? How did you put innovation at the heart of what you were doing?
Well, I think we made good progress that we're really proud of, but there is still a way to go. And we recognise both points. I think you have to take the energy out of the progress that you're making. Otherwise, it's hard to sustain the ongoing effort. And so where we're at right now is last year, we had 45% of our appointments, senior appointments, were women. And in the last quarter of last year was the first time that there was a majority number of women appointed in our senior levels, right? So that's a breakthrough moment for us, without any doubt. That it comes through lots of hard work, frankly, and ongoing focus. So I'm afraid there's no easy answer, and we absolutely recognise that. And it's fascinating listening to my colleagues and this morning and this conversation, right? And I'm sort of sat here reflecting a little bit as well on my own career and working with two female CEOs, which by sheer chance is what I've done. I worked with Francesca McDonough at the Bank of Ireland, and I worked with Jane-Anne Gardier at Virgin Money for 8 years. And it's for me, that's obviously just a sheer coincidence of being lucky enough to do two great jobs that happened to mean working with two great female CEOs. But a couple of interesting insights have come along the way that just continue to set the context for me. Jane-Anne has a story about an experience, and I think female CEOs do have experiences that would still surprise and shock us all along the way. And Jane-Anne's was going to an investor conference, as CEOs often have to do, incredibly stressful moment for a CEO, basically getting up in front of potential investors and pitching and being rolled on and off the stage with the next CEO. It's a particularly terrifying experience, even for CEOs. And she went along to one of these particular events, and she had her exec assistant with her, who was a bloke, happened to be a bloke, who was about 30 years old, young bloke. And this was literally a setup where a mic was handed over to you as you went on the stage, and you do your sort of 20 minutes pitch and answer some questions and you're gone. And the compere at the side of the stage handed the mic to the 30-year-old bloke, not the slightly older female CEO. Now, just that kind of instinct, and this is a relatively recent experience for her that I know she wouldn't mind me sharing shares herself as an example. And then I roll it through to joining the bank a few years ago, and I spoke to somebody who I really rate and respect in the exec search kind of line of work, and I made the decision to join, and I let this person know, woman, really really respect this lady, and said to her, I've taken this job. And she said, oh, who's that means CEO wise. Francesca said, oh, Matt, that's two female CEOs you've worked with then. And your point is, so it's a fascinating reaction from someone who I hold. I'm not going to mention the name actually, right? Because it's a private conversation, but it was an instinctive reaction from someone who is actually a real advocate for women, right? But still, even from someone like that initial reaction was, that might start to define your career. And obviously, if I'd worked with multiple male CEOs, no one would have batted an eyelid. Listen, it wasn't what you asked me. But that's
okay. But it's a really great example what you just shared there. And I've actually got something to share with you also. And I'll share that with you in a moment. It's an incident that I had when I went out for dinner with a client, and the waiter automatically kind of thought that my client was paying when actually I was paying.
Indeed, right. There you go. And they can be kind of small examples, but it shows us just how far we've got to go. And as per the comments that I said up front, really there, we're clearly making progress, but we've got to recognise it's an ongoing effort. And that's where I tie it back to your actual question to me, which is that for the bank, we've learned a number of things along the way. our initiatives have been wide-ranging. And so to that end, right, there isn't one particular thing to do. But to give you an example, I think firstly, it's crucial to monitor. MI is important. Otherwise, you really don't know what's happening and how you're progressing or how you're not. And we've got quite detailed around our analytics around this. We're to the level of understanding what's the application mix looking like for certain senior roles, and because we've got to intervene at early stages as to have we advertised this role appropriately? Are people aware that it's there? Is there a male sort of confidence, as we've just touched on, to promote themselves, whereas women might be slightly more reticent? And we will think about, well, who might be appropriate for this role, who might not have come forward. We can't leave things to chance, and that's all data led. It's insight led ultimately. So I think there's just a grounding in terms of our approach where we know where our facts are, and those facts also help with us understanding why we need to change and explain that to people, which is really important to me. This isn't a corporate objective. Well, it is. We've got a challenge and a target for ourselves, but that's not the reason for doing it. It's not the reason for being behind it. What I would say as well is, though, I do think, we signed up to the Women in Finance Charter as an Irish company, and we're involved in how that might roll out in Ireland. You would expect, with my background at Virgin Money and working with Jane Ann, that we would have been a signatory, but it had already happened by the time I arrived. And as we know from that work, actually having a stated ambition that's public, I think is really crucial. How can you say that you're serious about changing things if not? And I think it also helps bring about behaviour shifts. So ours is the 50-50, and we were looking to make senior appointments on, if you like, a run rate basis that ultimately changes representation in the organisation. And we think that was the best way to go about it for Bank of Ireland. As I mentioned before, good progress. Other elements that have really helped us along the way, we've recognised that if women aren't progressing through the organisation at the same rate as men, then we should be helping with that. It's the point that, Michael backed up as well. You can observe the issues or you can take action. So we do have 2 development programs that are fixed at different stages of the way that we view the career evolution in the Bank of Ireland. And those development programs are there to support with content that we think, from working with our female colleagues, is relevant to addressing the barriers that are in place. And I think, a lot of that as well, in working as a group together, means that there is a focused opportunity to address exactly the kind of dynamics that Terry was talking about. So there is formal development, but I think it's also part of that mix of just being able to discuss these issues and how you manage them with peers, with colleagues, that helps get clearer about what you might do differently or what dynamics might be at play, because there are many. And so we to back that all up, have rolled out, as most organisations will have done, training across the organisation. We have an annual approach around our core training for all colleagues. We have included unconscious bias training within it. I know it's a debated topic as to value. For me, all that effort is progressive. It needs to be in the context, though, of an overall effort. It can't be relied upon. So we've taken a really thorough approach, but we've been prepared to really invest and get stuck into where we think we've got blocks and barriers in the way, and without overly trying to figure out precisely what those may be, we're in action because we think that will deliver the results. And as I say, if there's one big learning for me now, after 3 years with Bank of Ireland and 8 with Virgin Money on this, is that the real secret is the constant focus and effort. And your challenge needs to sit within what you're trying to do as an organisation, what you stand for, what you believe in, so that you retain the passion around it and the commitment around it. But actually, in how you then approach it, you need to think about it like you would do any other business issue. Right, and then it maintains the focus and the ongoing challenge around it. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour as to what we've been doing.
Absolutely, it does, and it's that focus, and it's the constant, and it's the interventions, and it's the actions, because we can all talk a very good game, but let's now walk our talk. So that's really great. And Matt, you spoke very briefly earlier on about data and analytics, and actually I've got a question that has come through, and I just wondered if there's anything else that you wanted to add to this. That how is Bank of Ireland using data to inform their decision making? Was there anything else that you'd like to add to that?
Well, firstly, in both organisations I've worked in, I've really supported gender pay gap in Ireland. There is a requirement coming that's not with us. We're about to report our third year of gender pay gap open transparency. Again, I think if you're committed to changing something, you need to explain why. Your people need to be behind it, but you also need to be transparent about where you are. So I really advocate transparency. And for 3 years, we've used obviously straightforward data around gender pay gap reporting. But in practice, to the question that you've got there, for me, there are two crucial areas to look at. One is, how are you doing around attraction? So one side of the coin is, are you attracting? And this isn't just around gender, of course. So particularly for me around ethnicity, but also sexual orientation. We track ourselves as per the in-country census determines minority groups to be. That's how we follow things. So firstly, we have analytics around who are we attracting, and we're always looking at what's working, what's bringing a difference in terms of attraction to the bank, what do we need to try differently to make sure that we've got balance. We don't have a particular goal in mind other than I want us to be attractive to wider society. It's the wider society that we're serving and that we want to become more representative of in the bank. So there's the attraction side of it first. Then second is around progression. So we look at how are women progressing, but other minority groups as well within the organisation. And that has particularly helped us to see where we're not making within the organisation the kind of progress you'd expect. So at one level last year, we had a discussion about how challenging it is for us to attract senior women. We were particularly hiring last year around technology roles. Those are skill sets in shorter supply is a fact in the market. And that balanced actually our outcome last year at 45%. It would have been stronger if we weren't somewhat diluted in that regard. It's not an excuse, it's just a fact and a reality. But for me, I was able to say to the organisation and challenge our senior leaders to say, but at the moment, we're not hiring from management into senior management on a like basis from a representative point of view because we had those stats. So it's okay looking at the market, but actually we weren't making a proportionate and representative progression at one point last year in the organisation. You shine a light on your own behaviours and what is within your own control as a result of having that data. And then finally, and really crucially for me, and this goes across our whole equality and inclusion and diversity approach, we want to know, and I need to know, to know if I'm doing a decent job or not, how people are experiencing the organisation. Okay, and so we do that through our ongoing survey approach, but we have fantastic insights as a result of it, because I can see how different minority groups, as people identify as being minorities, are experiencing the company in every regard through our survey approach. So actually for the bank at the moment, on the whole, our minority colleagues are more engaged and actually having a better experience of the organisation, if you like, than our overall average. And that is a positive place to be, but there are specifics within it that are definitely not that case. And it gives me and the team pointers as to what may or may not be working. So attraction, progression, and experience of the organisation are the three fundamental areas that we look at using the insights that we get from colleagues.
Thank you, Matt. And I think the piece around the lived experience is, how can you take your whole self to work where you feel that you absolutely belong in that workplace? And that kind of brings me on to a question actually I have for Nancy. Nancy, a question for you is, that's just come through. Nancy, you speak to the power of storytelling. How can we take those stories and move beyond leveraging them to pull on people's heartstrings? in attempts to change people's mindset and instead make change at scale across organization?
I think having those stories and creating that space where people can talk about their lived experiences, it resonates with others who mightn't feel comfortable or feel like that's something that they're only experiencing on their own. And having this platform where women of color can talk about the challenges that they've faced or how they've moved through certain issues, that would inform others that you're not alone, and this is how you can do it, and you can leverage that. And I think that in itself would pull at people's heartstrings to say, okay, I'm talking about something that happened to me, and with that, then people can learn from it and either take away something from it and use that to either progress themselves or maybe change their own behavior if they were in a position that affected that person in a certain way.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Terry, Michael, what's next at the bank? What do you think is the next big thing that's going to happen at the bank that we can celebrate?
Well, I'll go for that one, Terry, will I? I mean, actually, one of the things we talked about is ally and allyship, and actually, just this week we've launched our allyship program, and I'm excited about it because I think it covers so many areas and embraces so many things across I&D. It's not just about gender; it can be across all the networks that we have. We've 6 different networks within our I&D. And I think it applies to every single one of them. And within that, though, what we've looked at is to try and make it much more accessible, to make it more visible, inclusive, and actually simpler to participate in as well. And we have recognized, and this is based on a program that we did within our Treasury and General Markets team, where we had a particular champion, I'll give him a call out, a guy called John Rain, absolutely fantastic guy, and he led it out. But we use that, I suppose, in an agile way of thinking and learning. To we do it in there, let's learn, and then before we bring it, we bring it somewhere else. Key in this is actually ensuring that you've learning and supports in place for the person who is the ally, because actually what we have found is there's a lot of allies actually already within Bank of Ireland, but that we were doing it informally, and we didn't actually have the support mechanisms in place to enable some of them and help them grow or bring it on and bring it to the next step. And that's something that we're doing now. And as such, we've launched that ally program, which it not just looks for participants to be involved in the program in terms of being coached and mentored. It actually looks for the participants and supports the participants who are doing the allyship and encouraging that process. And I think it's important if we can get that right about the supports to the person who's been the ally and the encouragement to the individual who's coming forward to participate in the ally program. I think we'll make it a better operating environment, and hopefully later in the year, and Matt made mention of our OpenView survey, we'll start to see further enhancements of what people's experience of working in the organization is, because that's what it should be about, having a positive impact on those experiences within the organization. Or else we've got to step back and look at the program and see how the program's working, and is it doing what it was intended to do, which is to improve the overall experience for all colleagues within the program.
Thank you for sharing that, and congratulations on getting this allyship program off the ground. And I look forward to kind of following that and seeing the progress happen. Terry, coming over to you for any thoughts?
Yes, I do. You would expect me to have some thoughts.
Oh, many of them.
The first thing is, when Matt was talking about minority groups, I was thinking, yes, and sometimes women find themselves in another minority group because of accidents or pregnancy or whatever. And it can put you in a very interesting learning position. I had one of those experiences when I had a fantastic car crash a few years ago. My car and another car just went into each other, 50 miles an hour each. My car was reduced to 150 quid's worth of scrap metal, and me likewise. There was no bit of me that wasn't broken, and I spent a year in a wheelchair. And I'm here to tell you that a wheelchair has only one advantage. It has an advantage over crutches in that you can take a cup of coffee from one room to another if you're in a wheelchair, which is impossible on crutches. But God Almighty, other than that, being in a wheelchair is such a pain in the ass. And at some stage, we were in our local eatery, and a bunch of us from the office, and the waiter was taking the orders, and he said to my husband, apropos me, "Does she take coffee?" And my husband looked at him and kind of laughed and said, you actually could ask her yourself. It's only her legs that are in bits. Her mouth was working fine last time I checked." And everybody laughed, and the waiter kind of said, "Oh." And it taught us all a lesson, because two lessons really. The first is that equality can be helped by big structural contextual movements, like has happened in Bank of Ireland. But in a one-to-one situation, it's often helped in the tiny, almost forgotten encounters of every day. And arising out of that, we developed a thing where we're saying to people, if you have pockets in your jeans or your trousers or your jacket or your dress, how about putting 5 small coins, cents, halfpennies, whatever, into your left-hand pocket when you're going out in the morning? And transfer those coins, or it can be beads, from one pocket to another, as you make somebody in the workplace feel fantastic. Because most times in the workplace, we assess people in year-end reviews, or we say casual things like, "Great job there." That's no use. Praise needs to be incremental and evidenced and constant, so that you're saying to somebody that you mightn't have thought it, but what you did yesterday made a hell of a difference to the group. Everybody felt better as a result of you developing that particular solution to that problem. Good on you. If you force yourself, and it is a forcing of yourself, to move those coins from one pocket to another, you become a better colleague, you become a better boss, and also you become a hell of a lot happier, because you're not focusing on yourself and wondering, as women wonder all of the time, did so-and-so really mean that? Were they getting at me? Were they reproving me in some way? It forces you to look at other people and to be confident enough to inspire and help other people. Everybody should do it every day.
That's a really, really great example of equality, and I'm definitely going to try that 5-coin challenge. Thank you for sharing that. I'm just conscious of time, and we're kind of running out of time. I could have spoken to you for much longer. In reflection and in closing, could I just go around the table and ask everyone to leave our delegates today with an idea, a reflection, a question, that may challenge our delegates today, or get them to think about something. Matt, perhaps can I come over to you first?
Of course, yeah. Firstly, thank you again for having us, and thank you to the rest of my colleagues and to Terry for joining in today. So the thought I'd like to leave, and maybe the idea as well, the thought is these are really challenging times. These are exceptionally challenging times when we look at wider world society. We've been through a 2-year pandemic. It feels like we might be stabilizing coming out of that, but it's a shock to the system like we've not experienced and weren't expecting. You then have the situation in Ukraine and concern that's bringing for everybody, understandably, and not knowing where all of that's going to end up. And whenever that happens, I notice understandably people sort of retrench, and we wonder, are we going to make progress on the issues that we're talking about this morning? And the reality for me is it brings through an even clearer opportunity, actually, There was lots of discussion at the start of the pandemic about the impact on women and female progression, and concerns for that. Whereas, whilst I think that was true short term, long term, I always saw an opportunity. I think we've learned so many different ways of working. We're working certainly in the bank in a flexible way. We certainly weren't a couple of years ago, and I think that can work to the advantage. So for me, I think let's take these difficult times and figure out how we turn them to be exciting times that we can progress our organisations. And my personal drive is to make sure we create places we're proud of our children coming into and be able to thrive within. And we truly have that opportunity, notwithstanding all the concerns that we have about other events, right? The specific that I'd leave is, as you've heard today from my colleagues and Terry, storytelling is the way to bring to life the humanity of people in your organization. We're still shaking off, I think, this corporate idea of how we need to behave at work. We truly just need people to be themselves and feel free to be themselves at work. It's crucial around diversity and equality. But just as a day-to-day experience, it's exhausting to think about being anything other than yourself at work. I feel over the last couple of years in particular, because of what we've been going through collectively, that's started to change. But my strong encouragement to everyone, and top tip, if you like, and the thing I know I'm going to keep doing and encouraging in the organisation, giving colleagues their voices so they can be heard and we can learn from each other and continue to humanise what it's like to work here, what it's like to work together, and what it's like to achieve great things together. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Matt. Very powerful. Nancy?
For me, it's more of a challenge to the listeners in an effort to maybe using the hashtag break the bias, to talk to someone outside of your circle and someone who's not like you, to maybe understand their path and how they think, and in an effort to become a better ally in educating yourself on how they experience things. And we might all face the same challenges, but we mightn't experience them the same way. So it's in an effort to learn that. So that's one takeaway I'd like people to get, to challenge yourself and speak to someone outside of your normal circle.
Thank you, Nancy. Terry?
I would suggest that from the very beginning of the equality struggle, it took two shapes, and they're equally important. The first shape is it set out to solve problems where women were actively excluded, solving problems. But solving problems is only the beginning. Everybody in every workplace has hopes and dreams and possibilities. And what we want to do is ensure that each one of them, whatever gender they are, whatever choices they make, can fulfill their hopes and dreams and possibilities to the utmost extent.
Thank you, Terry. Michael?
There's two things I suppose stand out to me, and have been kind of lessons, and I think the bank has actually made huge strides on this. One was a comment which said to me years ago, is don't hang your personality on the coat rack when you come in the morning. And I think Matt and Nancy have made it clear there. Be who you are in work. Be authentic, be real. And you know what, you'll probably find there's an awful lot more people like you than unlike you. But I think it's something that's, I've tried to do it since the person said it to me, and I think it's important. You've got to be real to yourself. The other thing that strikes me, and it's probably relevant in a broader context, excuse me, is kind of bad things happen when good people say or do nothing. And as good people, we have an opportunity to influence things, to say something, speak up when we see wrong, to talk up. It might make you unpopular, but you know what, so be it. You'll have done the right thing, or to take action and do to take an action to try and do the right thing. So it was something that was said to me years ago. It was said to me, by the way, in a rugby dressing room. So I'm not too sure what the message was going out that day. But you know what? I think it resonates to a lot of things in life. And when unfortunately we look at situations like in Ukraine and things like that in a broader context, to me it has meaning in it too. So thank you, Alexi, for today and the opportunity, and a pleasure being part of it.
No, thank you to you, Michael, Matt, Nancy, Terry, Michael. Thank you so much for being here today at our virtual table, talking about gender equality and how the Bank of Ireland is driving that in the world of belonging. We've absolutely enjoyed having this conversation with you. I hope to see you on Friday at the Dublin Masterclass.
Yep.
For building your DE&I strategy. And Nancy, I know you're popping in. Matt, if you've got a moment, and if you're in Dublin, do pop in. Terry, Michael. But thank you so much for today, and thank you for being our host partner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.